In this video, we're going to look at the myths and misconceptions surrounding people with special needs. These myths can cause stereotypes and contribute to understanding and misunderstandings and discrimination. And I'm going to cover 10 common myths that appear. Hi, my name's David Barra. I've got hidden and visible disabilities myself. I struggle with literacy. I've got my own kids struggle as well. I'm a former special needs teacher and I'm a senior lecturer of special needs, and my wife and I reviewed the inclusive education policy for Nigeria and helped rewrite it. So we live and breathe this stuff 24/7. So let's look at myth number one. People with special needs always are dependent upon others. Well, in reality, that's not true. It just depends upon the need. And what you need to understand is actually it's how can technology and how can people around enable people with special needs to live fulfilling lives. With the right support and accommodation, people can live as independently as possible. And it comes down to simple things. For example, there might be people who can't tie up their shoelaces. So what's the solution? You have a slip-on shoelace. There might be people who might not be able to open doors necessarily independently. Well, there's a technological solution for that. You've got sensors that potentially would open up the doors. It might be costly, but it's still possible. Then you've got the automation of toilets. And for example, if people struggle with reading, you've got software that can enable people to read and to write. So there are many, many different ways that are possible to enable people to live full, or as full as possible, lives. But it's just a case of it's understanding it. It's having the right mindset. It's having an open mind to look for solutions and create solutions, either invent them, make them, or look for the technology. So, myth number one, people with special needs are always dependent upon others. Simply not true. Myth number two, people with special needs cannot work or contribute to society. Again, that's just simply not true. You've got many people employed in jobs who have got disabilities, and you wouldn't even know it. You've got, you've got people. You've got one of the richest people in England who has got dyslexia. He's worth, I think it's over $1 billion or something or other, or certainly hundreds of millions. And he owns or his wife owns a chain of shops called The Range. He struggled at school with literacy. He was a market trader, and he overcame his literacy difficulties by working with other people. They supported his literacy, but actually he had special needs and he overcame them. Then you've got other founders of very high profile companies who have got hidden and visible disabilities. You've got people who've got mobility issues who work in numerous different professions, from retail to telephone sales to in hospitals. So it's entirely possible for people with additional issues to work. Now, there's one story that I'm going to tell you of somebody. I'm 53, of a guy that I saw growing up who worked at, if you're watching this from America, a gas station. In England, it's a petrol station. There's one guy, when I was a kid, when I was 7, who worked at a local gas station, and he filled up the shelves. He would fill up people's cars as well with petrol, because at the time the station, people weren't allowed to fill up their petrol. The guy didn't have any qualifications. He had additional needs, but he found meaningful employment in this particular place. And actually, people would go to the gas station and go to the petrol station because, by chance, the guy was really, really friendly. So actually, he attracted business to this particular gas station. Again, there's another guy that I can clearly remember who worked at a large supermarket where I lived. And again, he had additional issues, minor mobility issues, some speech issues, and a range of other issues. And his job at the supermarket was to collect the shopping trolleys. Now, for some people, you might think, well, that's a very minor and low job. But actually, for him, he absolutely loved it. He worked there for, to the best of my knowledge, 40 years, his whole lifetime, and he retired. And it gave him a sense of place, a sense of purpose. It enabled his parents to get on with their lives as well. So it's possible for people with a range of special needs and disabilities to contribute meaningfully to society. And I'll finish on this one, which is also you can work with people, can work in animal care, animal husbandry. It's just a case of it's understanding what the person's skill is, and again creating those enabling environments to enable that person to contribute in a meaningful way that's meaningful not only to society but that's meaningful to them. Myth number 3: special needs equates to low intelligence. Just because a person can't speak, just because a person can't communicate in the way people assume, just because somebody can't write something down or their handwriting is bad, does not mean that they're low intelligence. To be honest about it, special needs is a range, it's a spectrum of things, and it's a wide range of conditions, many of which have no impact whatsoever on people's intelligence. For example, people with physical disabilities or sensory impairments might have above average intelligence. And again, there's one guy that I used to work with, and he was a market trader, and his literacy level was, written wise, he couldn't read and he couldn't write, but he was a phenomenally successful business person. And this is going back in the 1980s, and he was a multi-millionaire working on a towels and linen stand. And for him, what he would do is he would read every single customer that came along, watch their shoes, see what quality shoes they were wearing. They may have looked old and raggedy, but he could identify the quality of the shoes and how much fundamentally they would have cost the person. He would look at their fingernails, and he would think and know if they've got manicured, and he would adapt his prices accordingly. He could read the people. He had this specific talent on understanding how people dressed and also understanding how much money potentially they would have. And again, he would vary his prices. It was amazing. He would vary his prices between 100 to 300% more depending upon people's shoes and fingernails. Because while on paper he seemed to have low intellect and his communication wasn't exactly great at times, he could read people very, very well, and he knew exactly what to do. So don't equate special needs to low intellect. It's contextual. IQ scales might not be appropriate for the person. It's understanding how to enable that person to demonstrate their intellect, their skill basis, to maximize their potential. Myth number 4: people with special needs are always happy and cheerful. The reality is people with special needs experience a full range of human emotions, just like everybody else. Assuming they're happy can be dismissive of their real feelings and experiences. Don't assume that if somebody's got a smile on their face, that actually they're happy. They could well be masking. And it's really getting to know that person and understand actually what they're about, and spending time with that person to understand really what they're feeling. So never assume that a person with special needs is always happy and always cheery. Myth number 5: special needs are always visible. The reality is there are so many invisible disabilities, such as learning difficulties, mental health conditions, chronic illnesses. Just because a person doesn't look disabled doesn't mean that they're not facing challenges. On a personal basis, again, I struggle with literacy. First essay that I wrote at university was 1,000 words, 600 spelling mistakes, 1 full stop, somewhere, never quite sure where it was. Had it not been for the technology that was around and the word processing packages that are around, that enabled me to do that. But it's again using the technology. As I'm talking to you now, I'm in a lot of pain with my back. I've suffered from back pain, I think, since I was a kid, and I think it might have been due to a sports injury. You might be talking to people who suffer from migraines. There are people, increasingly more and more people are surviving cancership. They might have had chemotherapy, and as a result of that, that might impact their ability to remember and to communicate. So never ever assume that the person who in front of you does not have a disability. Get to know them, find out, understand them, listen, learn, and allow them and enable them again to maximize their potential. Myth number 6, children with special needs should be separated from their peers. I'm a parent of 2 kids who have got additional issues, and the reality is that the kids are the kids. The reality is inclusive education benefits all students. Integrating kids with special needs into classrooms can enhance social skills and foster understanding and acceptance amongst all students. But, and this is where I'm going to do the but, and I'm going to say I'm a senior lecturer of special needs. I've worked in special needs school. My mum was a special needs teacher. My wife and I rewrote the inclusive education policy for Nigeria, and I live and breathe this stuff 24/7. The but with inclusive education is you need the right people with the right mentality and the right environment, both physically, you need the right tools around to enable that to happen. I've seen supposedly inclusive schools where everything seems to be fine on paper. If you read their websites, they look absolutely great. But the reality is the people that were employed there weren't inclusive. The way they structured the lessons, the way they structured the playground wasn't inclusive. And in fact, it caused harm to the kids. It caused harm because the kids were going there because they thought it was inclusive, and actually the kids were getting very subtly bullied. The environments weren't great to not allow the kids to play and engage with other people. So saying that we're going to be inclusive and actually delivering and developing an inclusive system, an education system, can be 2 totally different things. But at the core of it, at the heart of it, is employing people and having leaders that truly are flexible and have a very clear mission about what inclusion is. And they work with all of the stakeholders. That is the parents and understanding their needs, the kids understanding their needs, the therapists and the allied professionals, and the education system. And when that happens, you can truly create an inclusive environment and truly inclusive education system. If not, it will simply fail. The same principle applies to inclusive workplaces. You need the right people with the right mentality to work with all of the stakeholders to create that enabling inclusiveness. Right, here's another one. Myth number 7, people with special needs aren't interested in relationships. People with special needs have the same desires for relationships and being with other people and having romantic relationships as others. People are people. Some people want relationships, other people don't. Never ever assume a person with special needs or disabilities is not are asexual or uninterested in relationships. That's simply a fallacy or a myth, as we're talking about myths here. Number 8, having special needs is a tragedy. The reality is having special needs can present its challenges, and it does present its challenges. Again, I speak from personal experience. I live and breathe this stuff, and I know what the challenges are 24/7. But it doesn't necessarily define a person's entire life. Many people with special needs lead rich, rewarding lives, and they don't view their condition as a tragedy. Don't treat people as though it's tragic. Don't put your emotions and your thoughts on the person who has got the special needs, the disabilities, the hidden disabilities. Get to know the person, understand what they're about, let them communicate in their time how they feel. Don't impose your value system on the person. It's just fundamentally wrong. Myth number 9, people with special needs and disabilities can't learn. People that again, the reality is people with special needs can learn and acquire new skills. They might need a different approach or additional support, but they can always learn. And I'm going to give you one example, you might never have heard of this. There's backward chaining and there's forward chaining. Forward chain, there are two ways of teaching something. Forward chaining is starting at the beginning of a process and teaching everybody the step until you get to the end. So if it's tying your shoelace, the step would be put on the shoe. Then what you do is you then get the shoelaces, if they're shoelaces, pick up the shoelaces, fold the shoelaces, put them underneath, and so on. That's forward chaining. And the problem with that method of forward chaining, it can be incredibly frustrating because the person might get frustrated, they might not have the skills, they might need to develop the skills. And what you need to do is then enable people to be successful when they're learning. So the principle of that's where the principle of backward chaining comes in. What you do is you start at the end. So what you do is, with the example of the shoelaces, is the person has got their shoe on, they've got everything else, and they're just ready to have the laces tied. In other words, the bunny ears. And what you do is get the bunny ears, the laces, and get them to pull. They've tied their shoelaces, you got a victory, they've learned that skill. Then once they've mastered that skill, you then, let's get this right, get them to practice threading through the lace and then pulling the bunny ear. Again, they've developed that skill, they've become successful. And you work it backwards. And the reason why I tell this story is because there was a kid that I worked with many years ago in a special needs school, and his target was to tie his shoelaces, and he'd had the same target for 3 solid years, and he'd been taught forward chaining, forward chaining, forward chaining. Kid was frustrated, would get annoyed, quite frankly would have meltdowns, and his parents were incredibly disappointed until he got shown how to do backward chaining, and he learned from the end to the beginning on how to tie his shoelaces. And within, realistically, I'd say about 4 hours, he knew roughly how to tie his shoelaces. And then after that, it was just a practice of getting it, the laces tighter and practicing those really, really small skills. But the point about the teaching is by using backward chaining, by using other alternative methods, like for instance, going out working with animals, going out shopping, it could be cooking. There are all different methods in how to enable people to learn a skill. The critical thing is it's understanding what the skill is, enabling the people to be successful, and realizing that they are successful and they can be successful so they don't get frustrated and lose interest and walk away. People can learn, use art, be creative, but think about what the end goal is, what the resources you have to hand, what the needs are, and how that person learns. Myth number 10, and the last one, all people with disabilities have the same needs and abilities. Well, that's just plain straight wrong. Each person with special needs is unique. Each individual with the same diagnosis can have vastly different experiences, strengths and challenges. Not all autistic people are the same. I could quite easily go and get myself tested for dyslexia. I choose not to. My difficulties in literacy, my spelling is slightly different. My spelling issues are slightly different to others. My writing issues are slightly different to others. Not all autistic people are the same. Not all people with memory issues are the same. Never, ever stereotype somebody because they have a label. It's all on a spectrum, it's all arranged, and don't ever forget that the chance are if a person's got a disability or a special need, they might have others as well. Others might coexist. So if you're trying to support one particular need Actually, you might also need to support others or realize that they've got other needs as well, and you might need to support those as well. So everybody is unique, and it's a case of understanding that person and enabling them to maximize their potential. The aim behind this talk was to cover 10 myths around people with disabilities and get you to think and not make assumptions. If you found this interesting, if you liked what was spoken about, please like, subscribe, and share this video with others, and put your comments in below. Thank you very much for your time. I'm really grateful for it. Do have a lovely day.